You think you're making your own choices. You think your opinions are yours. But every day, invisible forces push your emotions, shape your reactions, and quietly influence your decisions. The worst part is that you rarely notice it happening until you've already lost. You are losing something valuable right now. Not your money, not your time. You're losing your ability to think without someone else's influence quietly sitting inside your mind. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. Every compliment can become a leash. Every criticism can become a weapon. Most people never realize they're already fighting a war they cannot even see. You've probably walked away from conversations feeling strangely guilty, confused, or emotionally exhausted without knowing why. That wasn't an accident. Someone understood your emotional patterns before you understood them yourself. That's how influence becomes control. The greatest victories are never loud. They're silent. By the time you recognize the trap, you've already stepped into it willingly. Psychological warfare doesn't begin with violence. It begins with doubt. A single question planted inside your mind can grow into a prison you built yourself. Every moment you ignore these hidden rules, someone who understands them gains another advantage over you. You were taught to believe honesty alone would protect you. Reality doesn't reward honesty. Reality rewards awareness. Tonight, you're about to see the hidden rules operating beneath everyday life. Once you recognize them, you'll never experience another conversation the same way again. You've blamed yourself for being too trusting, too emotional, too forgiving, but those qualities were never your true weakness. The problem isn't that you cared. The problem is that someone recognized your openness before they recognized their intentions. Manipulation survives because good people assume everyone plays by the same moral rules. They don't. Many systems quietly reward obedience over independent thought. They celebrate comfort while discouraging awareness. You were never told that confusion can be manufactured, doubt can be engineered, even confidence can be strategically dismantled. Every emotionally reactive person becomes easier to predict. Every predictable person becomes easier to influence. Your frustration makes sense because you've been trying to win games without ever being shown the real rules. That realization isn't meant to make you fearful, it's meant to wake you up. The moment you recognize manipulation, its power begins to weaken. Awareness changes the balance. What comes next isn't comfortable. It's knowledge many people would rather you never discover. Long before social media, corporate politics, and digital influence, there were thinkers who understood that the greatest battles were fought inside the human mind. They studied power not as force, but as perception. Among them stood Niccolo Machiavelli, a man condemned by some, misunderstood by many, yet remembered because he described power without pretending the world was kinder than it really is. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. That single idea shattered the illusion that appearances and reality are the same. It revealed that perception can become a weapon long before anyone draws a sword. This isn't about becoming ruthless. It's about recognizing the invisible battlefield that has always surrounded you. The hidden rules of psychological warfare aren't secret because they're complicated. They're hidden because most people never stop long enough to notice them. The moment you begin seeing those patterns, conversations change, relationships change, even silence begins to carry a different meaning because power rarely announces itself. It whispers, it waits, and it rewards the person paying attention. From this point forward, every lesson builds on one simple truth. Awareness always comes before influence. Now, the hidden rules begin.
The first hidden rule is this. Every emotional reaction reveals information. The person who controls your emotions begins controlling your decisions. Think about the last time you argued with someone who stayed perfectly calm while you became frustrated. Hours later, you replayed the conversation in your mind, wondering how you lost. It wasn't because they were necessarily smarter, it was because emotion narrowed your attention. The more reactive you became, the fewer possibilities your mind could see. That's why your first practice is deceptively simple. Before responding to criticism, disrespect, or provocation, pause. Even 5 seconds of silence can completely change the outcome. Silence gives your mind time to choose instead of react. Drop this in the comments. My silence is my strength. The goal isn't to suppress emotion. Emotion is part of being human. The goal is to stop emotion from becoming someone else's steering wheel. When you master your reactions, you quietly remove one of the easiest ways people manipulate you. Strength is rarely loud. Most of the time, it looks like restraint. People expect reactions. They struggle to predict composure. Control yourself first, and everything else becomes easier to understand. The second hidden rule is that the person who needs less controls more. Dependence creates vulnerability. The more desperately you need someone's approval, attention, or validation, the easier it becomes for them to influence your choices. Maybe you've waited for a message that never arrived. Maybe you've refreshed your phone over and over, wondering if you said something wrong. In that moment, someone else controlled your emotional state without saying a single word. The psychology behind this is simple. Scarcity increases perceived value. When your happiness depends on one person, your judgment becomes clouded. You stop seeing reality clearly because you're too busy protecting what you fear losing. Build a life so full that nobody becomes your emotional oxygen. Relationships become healthier when they are chosen, not needed. Drop this in the comments. I choose, I don't chase. The strongest position is never built on desperation, it's built on options. When people realize they cannot control your emotions through absence, they lose one of their most effective tools. Freedom begins the moment your peace no longer depends on someone else's behavior. The less you cling, the clearer you see people's true intentions. The need for approval is expensive. Independence is priceless. The third hidden rule is that silence creates uncertainty. Most manipulation depends on getting an immediate reaction from you. Think about every argument you've regretted. The damage usually wasn't caused by your first thought, it was caused by your first spoken sentence. When people can't predict your response, they begin questioning their own assumptions. Uncertainty changes the balance of power. Practice listening longer than feels comfortable. You'll discover that people often reveal more after the silence than before it. This knowledge is for protection, not for destruction. Use awareness to defend your peace, not to manipulate others. Drop this in the comments. My mind is calm, my vision is clear. Silence isn't weakness, it's space, and in that space, you regain the ability to choose instead of react. The loudest person in the room often exposes the most, while the quiet observer usually learns the most. The hidden rules reward patience because patience reveals patterns that emotion cannot see. The more comfortable you become with silence, the less vulnerable you become to pressure.
The fourth hidden rule is this: if you don't define yourself, someone else will. Every reputation begins as a story. The question is whether you're writing it or simply reacting to someone else's version. You've seen how a single rumor can spread faster than the truth. One careless sentence can follow someone for years, while 100 explanations barely catch up. The human mind remembers emotionally charged stories more easily than objective facts. That's why false narratives often travel farther than reality. People don't always believe what is true, they often believe what is repeated. So protect your reputation through consistency. Let your actions repeat the same message so often that noise loses its power. You don't need to defend yourself against every accusation. You don't need to answer every opinion. Over time, disciplined action becomes stronger than emotional explanation. Drop this in the comments. My actions speak before my words. When your behavior remains steady, manipulation has fewer places to attach itself. Predictability in your principles creates uncertainty for those trying to control you. The fifth hidden rule is to predict the pattern, not the moment. Manipulators repeat strategies because human behavior repeats patterns. They don't need new tricks when the old ones continue to work. Think about the person who disappears, then suddenly returns with perfect timing. They give you just enough attention to keep your hope alive before disappearing again. It feels random, but it rarely is.
Psychologists have long understood that intermittent rewards create stronger emotional attachment than constant rewards. Uncertainty keeps your mind searching for the next signal, the next message, the next sign that everything will finally make sense. Instead of asking yourself what happened today, ask what has happened repeatedly. Patterns reveal intentions that isolated moments hide. The moment you recognize a cycle, you stop mistaking repetition for coincidence. Most people react to incidents. Powerful thinkers observe systems. Once you understand patterns, surprises become much rarer because you stop judging people by isolated actions and begin judging them by consistent behavior. The sixth hidden rule is the most important of all. Master yourself before the battle. No strategy matters if fear controls the person using it. Every difficult conversation begins inside your own mind before it ever reaches another person's ears. If you've already convinced yourself that you'll be rejected, ignored, or defeated, you've surrendered before the first word is spoken. People who fear rejection often abandon their own boundaries before anyone even asks them to. They apologize when they haven't done anything wrong. They say yes when every instinct tells them to say no. They shrink themselves just to avoid temporary discomfort. Real strength isn't built during moments of pressure. It's built during ordinary days when nobody is watching. Strengthen your routines. Build discipline while life is calm so your character remains stable when pressure finally arrives. Drop this in the comments. I control what I become. When your identity is built on discipline instead of approval, manipulation begins to lose its grip. The greatest victory isn't defeating another person. It's reaching a place where your principles decide your actions instead of your impulses. And that's when everything changes. You begin noticing the invisible games that once controlled you. You stop chasing validation from people who never intended to give it. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You become slower to react, harder to predict, and far more difficult to manipulate. Without saying a word, you've already changed the balance of power.
Now everything comes together. For years, you believed the battlefield was outside you. You thought your greatest enemies were difficult people, unfair situations, or circumstances beyond your control. But the real battlefield was always inside your own mind. Every compromise you made against your values, every time you ignored your instincts, every moment you surrendered your peace just to keep someone else comfortable, it all trained you to accept less than you deserved. The people who shaped your fears rarely needed force. They only needed your permission. Every small surrender became another brick in an invisible prison, and prisons built inside the mind are the hardest to escape because they don't look like prisons at all. They look like habits. They look like excuses. They look like the voice that whispers, "Maybe it's my fault." But now you understand the hidden rules. You see emotional traps before stepping into them. You recognize manipulation before it takes root. You understand that awareness changes everything, because a mind that sees clearly cannot be controlled as easily as a mind reacting on impulse. The old you is dead. The version of you that chased approval, apologized for existing, ignored obvious patterns, and gave away your peace to earn temporary acceptance has reached the end of its story. From this moment forward, every decision becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. You no longer wait for someone else to give you confidence. You build it through discipline. You no longer depend on constant validation because your standards come from within. You no longer confuse kindness with weakness or silence with fear. You understand that true strength often speaks the least and observes the most. You are a weapon pointed at your own future. Every habit you repeat either strengthens your character or weakens it. Every thought you entertain either builds your freedom or slowly hands it away. Every boundary you protect teaches the world how to treat you. Power without discipline becomes chaos. Discipline without awareness becomes blind obedience. But when awareness and discipline work together, they create something very few people ever experience: genuine freedom. You are no longer searching for someone to rescue you because you have accepted responsibility for your own direction. You understand that every person you meet will test your boundaries, intentionally or unintentionally. Your response determines whether that test becomes a lesson or the beginning of another cycle. Confidence is no longer something you borrow from compliments. It comes from knowing that even if you stand alone, you won't betray your own principles. You belong to no one, not to fear, not to approval, not to manipulation. Your mind is your own. That is the hidden victory. The world may not change overnight. Difficult people will still exist. Manipulation will still exist. Pressure will still exist, but the person walking through that world has completely changed. And once your thinking changes, your future begins changing with it. So now the decision belongs entirely to you. If this way of thinking challenged you, if it forced you to question ideas you've accepted for years, then you'll know whether this is the kind of journey you want to continue. Subscribe not because I'm asking you to, but because you've decided your mind is worth sharpening. Knowledge changes nothing until it becomes action. Revisit these principles, practice them quietly, let your results speak louder than your explanations. I'll leave you with one question, and I don't want a quick answer. I want the answer that changes the way you live. What belief have you carried for years that after watching this, you're no longer willing to let control you?